It's time for Show Me the Franchise.
With Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
It's time for Show Me the Franchise.
With Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
Making your way on the web today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all the toxicity sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to hear it's time to show me the franchise, where jokes are in no short supply. You want a show with topics in all different shapes and size. You want to hear Show Me the Franchise.
Show Me the Franchise is recorded in front of a live studio audience. Welcome to Show Me the Franchise, the podcast that talks about franchises of all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, genres, and types. I am one of your hosts, Tom Stadler, here as usual with Mr. Fred Dakin.
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing today, Mr. Dakin?
Well, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and I'm wearing milk-bone underpants.
Hey, where'd the laugh track come from?
I don't know, but I like it.
It's a new budget, Fred.
Maybe it's your new neighbors.
Could be. It's actually been a lot of changes. We are back after a very long hiatus. Big year, Fred. Wow.
Oh yeah, a lot of big life events happening.
Yeah.
Some good, some bad.
Some good, some bad, and happy to report you are feeling healthy and happy again.
Yes, I got COVID real bad to the point I had like a body infection. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks plus a lot of recovery. Not 6 weeks, like 3 weeks.
Yeah,
It felt like 6 weeks.
It was a long enough time.
It was a 6-week ordeal altogether,
Yeah.
but I am feeling much better now, and I just didn't have it in me to do the podcast, and also it kind of led up to an event of yours. If you want to announce it, I don't want to step on your toes.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I do have a new band on my finger now. I am a married man, happily married. After recently getting married to a friend of the show, Jasmine Gonzalez, and we had a wonderful wedding last month as of this recording, and it was great, but it was a lot of stuff going on, as you know, and on top of that, we also moved, so the studio is no longer the Stewed anymore. We are in the Stewed 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's roomier,
Yeah.
it's cozier, but also still feels like home.
It does, right? It's the hardwood floors, though. It's a lot of more echoey. So if it sounds like we're really dialing down the echo on these episodes, that's why.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like old guest Joe Francisco used to live in here. So
did.
like, if there's a drop in the episode, you can think about like, what kind of weird shit did Joe do in this room before we moved in here?
I really try not to think about
Has
that.
Joe been naked in this room?
It's very possible. Have I been naked in this room? We won't know. Yeah. I have not. I don't think. But anyway, so yeah, a lot of big changes for Show Me the Franchise. But guys, we are back. And with a great topic, a cozy topic, if you will.
Yeah, we wanted to ease into it like a warm bath.
Yeah, so we thank all the guests we had lined up for your patience. We will be hopefully getting time to reach out to everybody again soon and get some guests on the podcast. But right now, we're just trying to get the train back on the tracks here, right?
Yes, definitely. We're very excited to follow up with some of the people we were going to have on.
Yeah. So to this week, though, as you could tell from the opening, we are doing the television series Cheers. And Cheers is, I think, about as cozy of a TV program I can think of, despite maybe some of the content being not edgy. I don't think it's edgy is the right word.
It's a show from the 80s. Is it all 80s? I didn't know if it started in like 79 or something.
No, I think it started in the early 80s. We'll get into it, but I think it actually ends in 1991.
Okay, wow.
So it does stretch. It touches the 90s, just it tickles into it.
Yeah, but it is one of those shows that I think overall does hold up from when I've been watching. There is moments where you're like, woof, but I think that's all TV from the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
This does a lot better than some stuff.
Absolutely. And I think it's got a lot of lovable characters, and introduces characters that get spun off. We will have to hold back, I think, on some Frasier talk because
yes, that will be its own episode.
Frasier is going to have to be its own episode because now there is also a reboot of Frasier. So it's that's a whole thing. But we will talk a little bit about Frasier Crane today. He's listening.
Yep, my hot take on the reboot, it exists and I watch it.
Oh.
That's all I'm going to say about it.
All right. Save the takes for something else. But I guess that's my first question for you then, Fred, to go back to Cheers. When did you first come across it?
So I didn't watch many old sitcoms. I feel like the first sitcoms I knew about were Frasier and Seinfeld. That was kind of, my time of noticing sitcoms, but it was always the theme song that I went back to. Like that was one that I always loved hearing it. I remember they would even play it on the radio sometimes. And I always remember hearing like, oh, that song's kind of got like interesting lyrics as it goes on. And they kind of like, it kind of has this, it's kind of like the Rembrandt song where its history is mostly tied to the TV series versus the band itself.
Right, right, yeah.
And I started watching Cheers probably in my early 20s to see if I would like it because I was such a Frasier fan. I loved Frasier because it's very much, it feels like a play sitcom where it feels like it's being acted out.
Yes.
Not a lot of cuts, and there's kind of high concept comedy, and that's what I love in a sitcom. And I was such a Frasier fan, I was like, oh, well, Frasier was on Cheers. I'm going to go back and watch Cheers as a Frasier fan, which at the time in my 20s wasn't the best idea because it's not a Frasier show. And the character of Frasier, to be who he is in the Frasier show, it's different kind of from Cheers. It took a little while for him to become the fully formed Frasier we're used to. So it's definitely a different feeling, even though it's the same character. So it didn't click with me until recently. Since then, I'm in my 30s now. I'm more of a fan of Ted Danson. I got into like Bored to Death, The Good Place, some of his new stuff. I knew him from Becker.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of like pictured him as like a standoffish asshole guy. And then he had kind of his sweet, eccentric old guy phase, recently. And now like going back and watching Cheers, it's kind of cool to see this other side. Plus, being such a big Pixar fan, John Ratzenberger is someone that I've always been kind of interested in being, and I've always been a fan of. So I was like, I need to go back and try Cheers out. And I've been watching it the past few months, and that's why we kind of decided to cover it.
Yeah.
What about you? Because you seemed excited when I threw it out, so I figured you had a history with it.
It's not actually as long of a history as you think it would be. Mainly because I think it was always a show my parents watched. I remember back in the day, and you kind of nailed it on the head when you said, oh, Cheers and Seinfeld are kind of like the classic sitcoms you think about. But when we grew up in the 90s, those were obviously already in syndication. There were a lot of reruns going on. So it's like one of those shows where if you go into the living room or something like that and your parents are watching TV, it's probably one of the two are on, right? And so I just remember kind of walking in and obviously hearing the song, and then, it also come on. I think it might have been on after The Simpsons or something like that for a while. They would have done reruns of it.
Right.
And that's when I'd always tune out because I was always on in The Simpsons. And then it would either be them or Johnny Carson or something. And then, so I think that was kind of my earliest memory of it, to be honest. And I didn't actually come into the series until maybe almost a decade ago now, where it just was Netflix, obviously, it's there. And then it was hey, we put all of Cheers on there. And I'm like, why not? I had seen a couple episodes of Frasier at that point, but I was also never big into Frasier. So I was just I kind of knew Frasier because that was on in the 90s. So you just sort of picked it up through osmosis, right? So even just knowing that, it's still jarring to see him as a bar bum for half the show.
Right.
Yeah. You're oh, right. He's so refined. He's so dignified, or just at least, very hoity toity in Frasier. And it's like his character doesn't really resemble that. Once he really gets settled into Cheers, he's just like coming to the bar, one of the guys.
Well, it took going to a refined city like Seattle for him to refine him, being with the Boston Rubes, he had to blend in a little bit, have a bit of lager. I feel like that's how he is on Cheers. Like that's the vibe.
100%. Yeah. He's definitely got the vibe of like, I don't know. It's almost funny because, and we'll kind of talk about this too, but I feel like he kind of almost took on a lot of like the personality traits that Diane brings to the show.
Yes, he is pretty much Diane in Frasier, the show Frasier.
Yeah,
that's what I picture. And also when Diane leaves, I agree. Yeah, they're very similar characters.
Like he's the high status character trying to like dunk on the low status characters, and they're all like, "You're just a brain." Hey there, Frasier. I don't know if you think if you don't know all the facts about the bar, then I know, huh? Ratzenberger's great. We'll talk a lot about the characters, but
we'll have to have him on.
Yeah, we'll call John Ratzenberger. I'm sure he's like, leave me the fuck alone. I've
got like 13 voiceovers I've got to do between Star Wars and Pixar.
Oh my God, he's got everything probably now. What a good career for him though, to just kind of be called in, do a cameo, get a payday, and
yeah, like we have a new Toy Story ride, come in and like throw out some lines for the day,
Yeah, exactly. He's like, all right, I'm there. So let's talk a little bit about the history, because the history is not super deep on Cheers, so we'll kind of roll through this rather quickly. But it was developed and created by Glenn and Les Charles and James Burrows. They aimed at creating a show around a Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn type relationship, which even for that relationship, that's in movies that are a little bit out of my context or like reference point.
But it's still like they want like a classic Hollywood romance set in a sitcom, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Which it hits mildly.
It does. And I think that's something that we do end up seeing kind of parodied again and again in many sitcoms to come, or just shows that have like a very will they, won't they type romance. Because Sam and Diane are kind of the OGs in that regard.
I have to ask this now before I forget. The beginning of the show is the will they, won't they? And then is the second half of the show, they should, why aren't they?
Oh.
Because like I'm watching it with Kirstie Alley. I'm like, two good looking people. They should.
Yeah. They handle that character interestingly, where they... It's hard because I'm like, I also don't know how much I want to spoil for you.
That's true. Yeah, we can put a pin in it. But when I'm watching it, I definitely was like, okay, they're doing pretty good with this will they, won't they romance. And then when she came in, she's kind of very like, she doesn't, her characters, but the way they dress, the way she has those eyes, she has that sultriness. And I'm just like, these are two very good looking tall people. They should probably kiss.
Yeah, they do a lot to the character of Rebecca that... there's some good things they find in forming a fully formed female character, and then there's also some old tropes they fall into. They're sort of we could have done better.
But you were, sir.
Anyway, but yes, so we'll talk a little bit about the will they, won't they of it all, because ultimately they developed that and came up with the characters of Sam and Diane. So, Sam is kind of the more average man, while Diane is very much class and sophistication. It's high status, low status, classic dynamic, right? It's like princess going for a pauper. So the idea was originally that a group of workers who interacted like a family, kind of with the goal of being very similar to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, if anybody's familiar with that. It's kind of like the OG, like office, like hangout type show.
The original Just Shoot Me.
Yeah,
Is that the David Spade one?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, or Murphy Brown or whatever.
There's a bunch of people in an office like shrugging.
Yeah. You're like, I can't believe you didn't hit that deadline. The boss is going to have your head for this. They also considered making an American version of the British television show Fawlty Towers. Have you ever seen Fawlty Towers?
I've never seen, but that's John Cleese's show, right?
Yeah. It's a lot more of a farce than I think Cheers turns out to be. And I mean, Cheers definitely has its farce-like moments, but Fawlty Towers is definitely like how the hell do these people operate? And it's got a very Monty Python, obvious DNA.
Yes, and I feel that they do that in Frasier a lot more, the French bedroom farce.
Yes. And, oh, man, how come we're not just talking about Frasier?
We'll get there. You got to lay the groundwork.
Yeah, exactly. You got to start at the point A before you get running, right?
And then you do the reboot.
Yeah. So this was based on actually a radio program that was called Duffy's Tavern. It was going to start looking like that, but they liked the idea of just kind of having the tavern be a place where people could interact. And then they kind of decided, well, this shouldn't just kind of be a workplace like comedy. It should involve all the bar people or the bar attendees too, right? It's like the barflies are half of what make the show work. So an early concept actually revolved around a woman becoming the new owner of the bar and creating animosity between her and the regulars, which you might be noticing right now with the introduction of Kirstie Alley's character of Rebecca in season 6. So they kind of brought that idea back.
Right.
But ultimately they liked the idea of like, no, let's have this be about kind of this one woman kind of coming into this world, and she's sort of the audience's surrogate into understanding the life and times of Cheers and how it operates. So they had a lot of discussions about the location of the show, which is famously in Boston, Massachusetts. Boston, if you will.
Boston.
I don't even know if I did a good Boston accent.
Pack the car and have it yet.
That's it. There you go. Thank you very much. It's Boston, Massachusetts. And they eventually turned up to the East Coast after going through Barstow, California, and Kansas City, Missouri, which that would have been two very different shows, I think.
Yeah. That none of the people have like cultural pinpoints for Kansas City, I don't think. Like Boston, people know Boston.
Yeah.
Like, Kansas City, isn't that like baseball?
I mean, yes, there is.
So that
baseball
makes
there.
sense.
But I would say right now, Kansas City is mostly known as a football town because of Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? It's like they've been won like 3 of the last 5 championships. So they're kind of a big deal. But ultimately, they found Boston kind of fit for the show, and they had used the Bull and Finch pub in Boston, which they had just basically picked out of a phone book as an old bar that they wanted to set in it. And when they asked the bar owner, whose name was Tom Kershaw, to shoot the exterior and interior photos, he agreed, charging $1. Kershaw has since gone on to make millions of dollars licensing the pub's image and selling a variety of Cheers memorabilia. As a matter of fact, Fred, I did go into the Bull and Finch pub when I was in Boston.
What? Tell us more. Tell us more.
There is a shot glass, I think, still in my cabinet here that says Cheers on it.
What?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, it doesn't look anything like the set, right?
No.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I think at the time, I was 21, but my friend was not. So I could go into the bar, but they couldn't. And so I was like, well, just go into the gift shop. I just want to grab a couple Cheers things just because I was like, this is Cheers.
Right.
So it's like you go down the stairs, just like in the show. And it's like, oh my God, this is kind of crazy.
And what's cool to think about is Ted Danson's probably been there. Shelley Long has probably been there. They've all probably visited this place for like promotional reasons or not. So.
And they probably still, I mean, I bet you that freaking George Wendt like still lives there.
I mean, obviously thing with him is anywhere he goes, like he just gets a beer. Like if it's a place that's serving beer, they'll just pop a beer in front of him.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I would buy him a beer if I saw him. So the Bull and Finch, just as an extra fun fact, became the 42nd busiest outlet in the American food and beverage industry in 1997. So that was about 5 years after the show went off the air. Not bad for I guess a place that's just not even really the set. Like it was just
it's not even called Cheers.
Right. It's sort of like in Twin Peaks, like where you have like the town that like got shot for it, but it wasn't actually all filmed there.
Right.
Yeah, which is a throwback to our last episode.
Was there a fancy restaurant above the bar or a restaurant?
I don't know if there was. That might have been developed for the show itself, but they didn't have any information on that.
So that restaurant always sounds good.
It did. I did always love the episodes too, where they'd have to go up to the restaurant because it's just funny to think about the idea that like there's this busy restaurant going on right above this bar where all these people are, and like because I always ask like, well, how do people find this bar? They probably go to eat and they're like, okay, I got to wait for our table. I'm gonna go down and have a beer.
Yep. And one of the best bits in one of the episodes is where the bathroom's broken and they have to use the restroom upstairs, so they have like the blazer that everyone can throw on because it's a nice restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And like Norm can barely fit it on and he goes up there.
It's great. It's a great bit. I love the idea of the community jacket. So the character of Sam Malone was originally intended to be a retired football player and was slated to be played by a guy named Fred Dryer, who I'm not familiar with.
So he's in the show. I looked up a picture of him. He is one of like either Sammy's old player friends or like a newscaster who will show up and be like, hey, Sammy, you know, we'll get you back in there. Any of those episodes where
that's
kind of
right.
He's that guy
Gotcha.
every time.
Okay. I got it now then. So that guy would not have been a good Sammy.
No, he's a great face. And like, I'm always excited to see him on the show, but I don't think he has the kindness and the juice. Like,
No, I mean, Danson was chosen for the part because he was younger, A, had more acting experience, B, but also he's charismatic as hell.
yes.
Like, and you talked about like first time you saw Ted Danson. I never watched Becker. I always thought that looked like the most boring show ever.
Yeah, he was just like a grumpy doctor. That was like the whole thing with Becker, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, is that right? That seems like it seems very on brand for current Ted Danson, not young Ted Danson. Because I think the thing I knew him from was 3 Men and a Baby.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about his, film career.
Yeah. He was, with Gutenberg and Tom
Selleck.
Yeah, I almost said Sizemore. I'm like,
And the
that's not right.
Ghost.
Yeah, and the Ghost.
And of course, we can't forget. Bum, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
It's hard to like see them as the same person to me.
Honestly, I think that might have actually been the thing that inspired me to watch Cheers finally, was I saw him in Curb and I'm like, Ted Danson seems funny. Maybe Cheers is pretty good. And then I was like, I'll go check it out.
You gotta check out Bored to Death if you've ever seen that on HBO with him and Jason Schwartzman and Zach Galifianakis.
I haven't seen that, but I have heard
That's
great
like
things.
the top tier modern Ted Danson. I recommend it.
Nice. See, that's what I want. I want that Danson of like The Good Place.
That's how, I swear no one watched Bored to Death, but that's how he got The Good Place.
Really?
Is him, and they're different characters, but it's that sweet kind of dumb, but like I'm rich and kind of like have my, I have my druthers up a little bit, but it's that kind of Danson.
I love it. That's a good Danson. Because, I mean, and we can talk a little bit about just him now. Because basically when they cast him, that's when they were like, well, he's not really believable as a former football player, but he's definitely believable as a baseball player because he's tall and lanky. And like, it's like, yeah, if you told me he's a pitcher, like, and he puts on a baseball uniform, you're like,
He's got the Kevin Costner thing where he looks like he could play baseball.
right. Which Kevin Costner did play baseball.
Well, yeah.
Ted Danson was not a fan of sports at all. So he had to go to learn about how to pretend he knew a lot about sports, is how he put it. Because he didn't know a lot about sports and had never been to a baseball game, which that to me is crazy.
Especially back then, I feel you could like hop fences and go to MLB games back in the day.
I mean, yeah, I get it. It was 1982, so maybe he like wasn't all about that. He was obviously in acting school and probably doing a lot of theater productions. But I'm like, your dad never took you to a baseball game? Like, ever?
He's like just busy wearing black turtlenecks, doing Shakespeare.
It's like, I've got better things to be doing out there. I don't need to be in that game. His Boston accent's great too. It's so subtle. Like, he also was sent to bartending school to prepare him for the part, and that's so he really didn't know much. But I mean, he looks like he knows what he's doing. I think that's what's so good about him is like behind that bar, he's believable.
He drinks the hell out of a club soda.
Yeah,
That's the one thing I noticed. Like, he does a lot of good business with like a glass bottle of club soda.
yeah, absolutely. Or a good mug of coffee.
Oh yeah.
I love his reactions when he's like taking a sip of coffee, he's just staring somebody down. Like, what is this person up to? Because just Carla's up to some bullshit.
She's kind of like the Peeves of Cheers. That's what I was thinking today. Like, if you remember from the Harry Potter books, there was Peeves the poltergeist, always just causing trouble.
That is kind of Carla in a nutshell. It's very fitting that she just was selected, or I guess we'll get to the spinoffs in a second. We'll get to that in a bit, because there was also another spinoff besides Frasier. There is one more person who was in consideration for Sam Malone. This probably would have. Do you know about this?
I'm waiting.
Bill Cosby was also considered for the role of Sam after having been recommended by the network.
Yeah, it's like, here's the thing. Would have been good. Problem is, we couldn't watch it anymore.
Yeah. Because, like, who's watching Cosby Show reruns right now?
Not me, man. Like, that's like my whole thing without getting too dark about stuff with, like, people being canceled. If it's someone who's, like, physically hurt someone in that anyway, I'm kind of out. Your Kevin Spacey's, your Bill Cosby's, I don't really enjoy watching it. If it's someone with shitty politics, I can kind of be like, I don't like them. I don't want to give them money, but I still can kind of enjoy their music. It's kind of my thing. But
yeah, on
someone on a Cosby level, I'm just like, no, I kind of want to forget you ever existed.
Yeah, it's a little dirty, right?
Right, yeah. It would have been good, but it would have sucked because we wouldn't have had the Cheers as we know it, and Bill Cosby is not someone I want to see on my screen anymore.
Yeah. Very unfortunate, but a bullet dodged in not casting him and going with Ted Danson instead. Shelley Long then was recommended by various sources to the producers for the role of Diane, but I guess Long wished to be offered the part straight out and had to be coaxed into giving an audition, which kind of goes along with Shelley Long's personality. I think from behind the scenes, she's not always been the easiest person to work with.
Is that because I never looked up any? I haven't, because I was going to try to watch the whole show, but I don't care about having things willed. I didn't know if there was any drama to her being in the show and then not being on it anymore.
I think it's a lot more innocent than it came across, is that she wanted to go have a Hollywood career. She thought that her star was shining bright enough that she could go and make movies and people would go see them. But I think after she had pretty big series of busts, it was just sort of like, well, maybe you're just kind of TV, but she never wanted to come back.
Because I only know her from Cheers and when she showed up as, like, I think the mom on Modern Family.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a legacy Cheers role in a sense. So,
yeah.
I didn't know any. Did she have a career before this? I'm assuming she had to have some sort of career to demand, like, not wanting to audition, or maybe she was just being like, oh, you know what? I don't want to audition.
Yeah, I think from what I read is that she had done a few things, nothing like extraordinary, but she was at least caught enough attention of the producers to be like, yeah, she's somebody who can take this, and this is like perfect for her, because she really exudes that like Boston snobbery that is kind of very well known for Boston now.
Mm-hmm. And she does really well being snobbish, but it's also like hypocritical too, because she's kind of like with them every time. It's like the person who thinks they're too good for their group of friends, but like does all the same shit they're doing and is in the exact same position.
So I guess they finally did convince her to read for the part, though, and they said as soon as they saw her, they knew that she was perfect.
Because she's excellent.
She is great in this show. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I get why, if she had like a manager, if she's like, yeah, I can go and make this happen, why not? I mean, she's great in the Brady Bunch movies, but
is that okay? She like the mom?
She is the mom.
See, that was a good guess. That's good casting.
Yeah. You've not seen the Brady Bunch?
I've not seen the Brady Bunch movie.
Oh, man.
Is that an episode? Is that a Patreon?
If that's a Patreon, it's
like a Patreon commentary with a couple of Coors Lights.
No, I think... look, we won't get too off the trail here because we're trying to get back in a groove here, but the Brady Bunch movies, I think in a way, age about as well as the Addams Family movies. I think the Addams Family movies executed to a T, but like Brady Bunch, I think they really picked on how fucking weird that family is. Like it's just like the weird energy of that show, and like they made a very bold choice in being like, these are people who haven't left the 60s, but it's the 90s, and like
And then the other thing, which I guess I knew because I said this, and we'll get back on track, was I was like, oh, it's a Brady Bunch movie doesn't mean it's a movie with the people from the Brady Bunch. It was akin to a Flintstones movie.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
It was like the Addams Family.
Or
right?
the
It's
Addams Family, right? Like
Yeah.
you said. Okay, that makes a little more sense when I've heard things talked about it. Because when I'm like, you're like, Shelley Long plays the mom. I'm like, oh, yeah, I get that now.
But yeah, the whole gag is that they're still acting like it's 1967 and it's 1994 or whatever. And like everyone's like, the hell's wrong with you? So like they're interacting with like kids who are dressed like grunge rock, like like they're coming out of like the Seattle scene, and like you got them still wearing like their 60s like jumpers and so it's funny, and she's good in those. I mean, but I don't think that was enough to make a Hollywood career for her. So it still is like a dicey decision that she left Cheers, but we'll talk about why that worked out a little bit and how they kept it going.
Right. And I will say, yeah, with her, she does a really good job on the show where she does have a lot of material where she's kind of like the annoying character in an antagonistic way. And she kind of is able to, for the most part, dodge that and kind of make it palatable.
Yes. Where she doesn't seem so insufferable that you're like, oh, why would they ever waste a breath on her?
Mm-hmm. Insufferable and likable at the same time, kind of.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Because, yeah, she definitely is like, I don't even know how you want to call it. She's just, I don't know. She's very her.
We got to have her on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We should call Shelley Long and be like, hey, you want to do the pod? Mm-hmm. You should. She'd be great. Character of Cliff Clavin.
She won't audition, though.
No, she won't. She'll be like, as long as I get asked on and I get my payday, then everything will be okay. I had a friend in high school who we always said was like Diane because God, this is almost like doxing somebody, I feel like, but it's not. But they ended up going to school in Boston. And just had they were very book smart and kind of like hoity-toity like that. And oh my God, it was like after they went to school in Boston and came back, I was like, you have turned into Diane. I think I was watching the show at the time and I am just like, it's you. It is you. You are that person. I'm like, this is a real person. So I think that always added more to the character for me. Character of Cliff Clavin. For you, Freddie. Was created for John Ratzenberger after he auditioned for the role of Norm, which eventually obviously went to George Wendt. But while chatting with producers afterward, John Ratzenberger asked if, hey, we're going to include a bar know-it-all? And a part that he would go on to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he even said he was like, I had a really bad audition. Like, he didn't feel like he was going to get the part. And that was kind of his, like, last minute, idea, like, hey, you should have this character.
Yeah.
Worked out.
Which it is, because it's almost like a Cliff Clavin move to ask them to be like, hey, you're going to put this kind of character in there?
Yeah, right.
You know that guy at the bar always acts like he knows more than everybody.
Which, I'm probably in a small group where I'm like, I'm a Cliff Clavin over Norm Peterson guy. I love both, but yeah. I love Cliff better. He's my guy.
Cliff is good shit. And plus, he's always done early on his route. Like, he comes in with his male gear on sometimes. So, most Cheers episodes were, as the voiceover stated at the start of each episode, filmed before a live studio audience on Paramount Stage 25 in Hollywood. Generally on Tuesday nights. I don't know why that's pertinent information, but that's in here. Scripts for a new episode were issued on Wednesday before a read-through. Friday was rehearsal day. Final scripts were issued on Mondays. So it was a quick turnaround in between episodes, which that level of writing now, I feel like doesn't exist because everybody's writing like a full season of TV now at a time, right? Like, even for like Abbott Elementary, which I think is like an example of a popular modern sitcom that also was very inspired, you can tell by Cheers, with like the will they, won't they and all that. It feels like that's something they've put a lot of thought into, and maybe they do have a traditional writer's room. I don't know much about it, but I would not be shocked if they're like, yep, we've got most of the season written and we're just going to kind of roll into filming. So we'll talk a little bit about that song that we heard in our parody of it, which I think is great.
Yeah, probably better than the original.
Honestly, before Where Everybody Knows Your Name, which was written by Gary Portnoy and Judy Hart Angelo, became the show's theme song. The Cheers producers rejected 2 of their other efforts. Lyrics for the original intended to satirize the lifestyle of old, decadent, old money wasps. But to meet the producers' demands, they rewrote the lyrics to be about likable losers in a Boston bar. And then when Portnoy and Angelo heard that NBC had commissioned 13 episodes, that's when they finally created the official theme song, Where Everybody Knows Your Name, and rewrote the lyrics to the song they had previous.
Now he goes around doing pizza reviews on his YouTube channel.
We should see if it is the same Portnoy family.
Barstool. I'm seeing a connection here.
You're almost making me look this up. Wrapping this up. During its debut season in 1982, Cheers was critically acclaimed in its first season, but it landed a disappointing 74th out of 96 in the shows in that year's ratings. However, because of the critical support and the early success at the Primetime Emmy Awards and the support of the NBC president at the time, they thought would be the main reasons the show actually survived and went on to its eventual success. One of the writers believes that the most important reason that the network recognized that it did not have other hit shows to promote besides Cheers itself. So they later wrote that they had nothing better to replace it with. So they had nothing to promote it and they had nothing to replace it with. So they just kind of let it roll. And thus Cheers went on for 11 seasons. Highly rated.
Same as Frasier.
That's right. It's kind of or did Frasier go a full 11?
Yep, 11.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That is pretty crazy. Man, no kidding.
Yep, so I guess he's played, I don't know, I think he's in the first season, but at least 22 to 25 years of playing Frasier Crane.
That's pretty wild. Oh, no, Frasier's not in the first. He's in the second.
That's
season.
what I was like. I don't think he's in the first, but that's why I cut back a little. I was like, so 10 and 11 plus 2 seasons of this new show, 24, a Jack Bauer's amount of years.
Yeah. 24. I love it. But I think he is, no, yeah, I guess, unless you count The Simpsons. I was going to say, so they've played.
Is he Frasier in The Simpsons ever? I guess they've done that.
No, well, no. What I mean is, like, I was trying to think, is he like the longest running TV character? But I would say all the Simpsons characters, obviously, like
Just
30 years plus now of being played in an order. But I guess now he's coming back for his record. He is on The Simpsons, though. He's Sideshow Bob.
Mm-hmm. Bart.
D. Bart D.
Oh, no, I don't want to try to kill you, Bart. I'm reformed. I love talking like Kelsey Grammer. Oh, yes.
He's got such a good voice. Cheers the show, though. So, yeah, we talked about 11 seasons. Highly rated in many of its succeeding seasons. I mean, it is just a staple, I think, in so many ways because it did inform so many shows that came after it. But I guess where we should probably go from here, though, Fred, is like we talked about 3 people that got cast in here. We should talk about the rest of the core cast, right? We brought up Carla before.
Carla.
Played by the great Ray Perlman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who I always knew from Matilda.
Yes.
The only thought I ever had, Matilda. Which I remember, like, being young watching Matilda and thinking the mom was kind of good looking, which is interesting because I don't think she's a bad looking lady, Rhea Perlman. But it was just interesting. When I was young, I was like, that's a good looking lady.
Yeah.
And she's pretty vile in Matilda, like, as a person.
Well, both and Danny DeVito are pretty ridiculous.
They just pretty much, like, showed up as themselves, just yelling at each other, get out of the car!
I think what always made me laugh about that movie for some reason, they look tall, but I think because Mara Wilson was so small.
And probably how it's shot. It's a lot of like looking up at adults.
Right.
But then it probably does the trick later in the movie where she learns her magic powers. The screen is now level. I don't know if it does that, but if it was smart filmmaking, it would.
Save it for the Matilda episode. Fred.
Boom, boom, all the way. Or,
Oh yeah,
that's got a banging soundtrack.
It is good. It's one of Danny DeVito's better efforts.
Great director.
But yeah, so we talk about Ray Perlman there, and talking about Ray Perlman there, you know what I mean. But yeah, it's Carla. She's a very, I don't know, she's a very strong female character. I think at a time when you'd be hard pressed outside of like the Mary Tyler Moore show to find a fully formed, like, strong female character. And Diane gets dunked on a lot, even for as high society as she is, high status, I should say.
Yep, I like Carla is very much like, I hate to compare it to her husband, but is doing kind of the Danny DeVito thing where it's like no shame in the character.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the best, most powerful like comedy acting ever, is where it's like, oh, this person is just giving them all and has no shame of how ridiculous or goofy they look. And I just love like a character, I wouldn't call it one note, but has a single note, but is played beautifully. And I feel like she's going to do the same thing, but it's also kind of like, is it, who has the football? Is it not Lisa? And Charlie Brown?
Charlie Brown. Lucy.
When Lucy pulls the football, it's kind of like, is Carla gonna be a little jerk? And it's like, I'm not gonna be a little jerk. And
I know.
like, I'm a little jerk. And I love it.
Which I think in a way though, that's because she is in a way the anti-Diane in so many ways, right? It's like you have a tall, thin blonde, you have this little brunette who's like Italian, and she's a little rough around the edges. She's like working class, and I think it's so funny too that they're both are waitresses, and yet they could seem like they come from completely different backgrounds,
Right.
Which I think it's hard to speak about Carla and her dynamic. And it's one thing that I do think, you know, you're going to find as you keep going with Cheers is like her dynamic. I think they don't have that same animosity between her and Rebecca.
No.
And I think that's the hard thing. They almost kind of see each other a little bit more. They're like, yeah, men, right? Like, and I think that's what kind of makes her though a great character, is that a lot of she doesn't take shit from any guys except for shitty husbands.
Steeliness was the word I was thinking of for
There you
Kirstie
go.
Alley and Cheers.
Yes.
Very steely.
Yeah.
And I think Carla respects that steeliness in a way. So she's not as bad. But she'll also, if Sam is, you know, this is still early, so I don't know if they kind of, you know, make up and like run a little more, you know, better together. But I feel Sam's always complaining, and that's when Carla's willing, because she's always on Sam's side. That's why I love that. Like, she's Sam's number one supporter.
Oh yeah, Absolutely. Yeah. He's never anywhere where she's not behind him all the way. Sammy. But it's great. Her family is ridiculous. And
I love her ex-husband, that actor who, like, I don't know, he probably wasn't on The Sopranos, but he could have been. He is great. I love that her son. So there's this few episodes where her son wants to get married. And that's an episode, and the son's like this little like Italian kid, like, "Hey, mom, I want to get married." That kid comes back 3 years later, and he's doing an impression of the dad character. As, like, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna act like the dad now," and it's very interesting and funny.
he's very much like doing like this thing.
Yeah, he's doing this thing.
It's what? Oh, he's doing a De Niro. That's what he's doing.
He's doing like a Dan Hedaya meets Robert De Niro. It's kind of the vibe.
Like, oh, what do you think, Emma? It's so stupid because it's just a bad. But we do have to talk about her ex-husband too. And I'm trying to look up the actor name right now. I've been trying to punch him in here in between us discussing. Because it's Nick. I know.
Yeah, Nick Tatelli.
Yeah. Dan Hedaya. That's who it
That is Dan Hedaya. I guess I've never seen Dan Hedaya that young before, which makes sense that I was like, he's got a real Dan Hedaya vibe.
Yeah, which that's exactly who he is, because that's, I mean, and Dan Hedaya does play. I do find, though, I think it was an act that kind of wore thin to the point where I'm like, oh God, it's another fucking Tortelli episode. I'm like, because
Yeah,
I think
they add up. I agree. And I'm not even all the way through the show.
yeah, it's like when you binge it, and that's kind of how you have to watch Cheers now. You just binge it, you throw it on in the background, you let a few run. and you're like, oh God, it's another Tortelli episode. And it's just, and I think you also get kind of tired because it's the only time that Carla becomes a pushover, and like it's sort of like the Ron Swanson getting like done in by the Tammys thing.
Yeah, that's another thing that got old after like the first episode.
Yeah.
For me. And every time you hear Tortelli, you get hungry because you want tortellini.
And so it's almost no shock that the spinoff, the Tortellis, did not last. They did try to make a whole show where Carla was not really in it. It was just the rest of the family. And if you had pitched that to me, I go, I ain't watching that. Like,
I mean, if it's like a HBO like hard R show, like starring like Dan Hedaya, it's just following him around.
that's basically like following Polly Walnuts. Like,
I'd watch that too.
hey, don't.
Dan Hedaya, great Richard Dixon.
Oh God, and Dick, right?
Yep.
yes. I was like, I know he's in one of those movies. But yeah, there's a lot to like, I think, about Carla's character. I think there's times that she could wear thin a little bit to herself, but I think I liked her as sort of a foil to Diane, and that's when Carla was at her best. Like it does become a little bit of a more tough hang, but then it challenges the writers to find a little more with them, and you're sort of like, yeah, Carla wants more than just to be a waitress sometimes, you know?
Whether they work it to the bone too far, I feel the writers of Cheers are really good at like getting all the meat off the bone of a story, plot, or like character interaction.
Yes, 100%. And I think you even kind of find that, like, I don't know, a mainstay like Norm has like depth to him sometimes.
Right.
But it does sort of feel like when you try to classify Norm, he is just sort of what he is, right? He's the dude at the end of the bar, the guy who's always there. And I've never been enough of a bar goer to be like, who's the guy who's the Norm of this bar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I'm not a bar goer either. I like going to bars. I like going to old bars with old towny people, and sometimes I'll like, especially when I was driving Lyft and Uber, I'd be done work like earlier than most people because you don't want to drive for 8 hours. You drive for like 6 hours. And sometimes I would go grab a beer at some of these kind of towny places in Cudahy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you ever had this experience grabbing a drink at a bar that you're not familiar with. Sometimes you go in there and it's like mildly busy with regulars and they're just cooking. As in, like, they're talking, there's shit going on, there's all this activity, and it's like their own world that you, like, stepped into. Yeah. I love being an outsider in that feeling, and Cheers doesn't, like, make me feel that, but it kind of captures what makes that fun, is just kind of, like, look at all these different characters here, kind of just at this watering hole of these, like, different stories, interweaving, and, like, it being a community in the oddest way. Yeah. Like, I love that. And most times you go to a bar by yourself for your beer, no one's talking. But every once in a while, I've been in places where, like, I've seen, like, 60-year-old dudes showing each other YouTube videos of, like, tractors and just, like, getting so into it and just, like, stuff like that. I had people, like, telling story, like, doing, like, Cliff Clavin style jokes out loud to people. Like, there was like something that happened. I was at this bar by my house, Francisco's, waiting for pizza, and there was this lady who read a news thing, and I don't know if this was the person, but it was someone's like, oh no, Jennifer Aniston was in a car accident. And this guy said, well, I had nothing to do with it. I was just like, this is the best thing ever. Like, my day has just been made. So yeah, if I had a bar where I knew I could just watch people like Cliff and Norm and just people like act goofy and, do their business, I would love to. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you say that too, because obviously we were in Lake Geneva recently and had, we're going around the town is what I'm trying to say. It's like, it's like we're on vacation, having some fun, and definitely found a bar that was like the place that people who work go to when they're done with their shifts. So like the people who work in like a resort town, where do they go? We found that bar. Like we went in there because it was like, oh, it's well reviewed, but probably because it's well reviewed by the people that live there, right? And just like listening to them like talk about their days, and then you have these guys who are just talking about like their poker like winnings and stuff. Like, oh, you should have seen me calling that bluff, and oh, I got him.
It's almost like a fishing story. I love it.
It is. Oh my god! And I'm like, and never did I feel more like I walked into a Cheers type bar where I'm like, I was like, these are all the regulars. I said, these people, they're in here. If not every night, then probably every Tuesday. Or every Friday or whatever it is, they're here. Like, this is the place for them. And I appreciate a home like that for people where they can find a little bit of community and, like, that's where it's at.
Yeah, it's like I don't want that for me, but I want to check in on it every once in a while. You know, like, there's a place I'm just name dropping places in Bayview or in Cudahy-ish area that I think are actually kind of cool watering holes.
Sure.
Clementine's is a newer place right on Clement. And I've been going there every occasional. Really nice, fun people so far.
Nice.
I guess that's technically still Bayview, but
I do feel like you have a knack for finding the bars that I haven't heard of yet. And I'm like, I got to check this place out.
yeah, I like to go into places that look like they're an old house, and they just have like there's this place called like Foggy Mountain Dew in like St. Francis.
You made that up.
No, and I stumbled upon it with a friend. We were just walking. We were just kind of, it was like a summer night. We were walking, going to different bars, and just down this road in the middle of like a neighborhood, like Foggy Mountain Dew. I felt like I was walking into a house, and I just love that.
That's awesome. There are some of those types of bars, though. Definitely in the southern Milwaukee area. Like, there is just a lot of those types of bars because they're places that either have been open for years or they're taking over places that were open for years.
Right.
And have probably turned over once or twice at this point. But yeah, you do love that kind of vibe. And Cheers does have that vibe. I think they even say it's like established 92 or something like that in the show, which, yeah, it's already almost a 100-year-old bar by the time we're witnessing it in 1982 or whatever it is at that time, right? So it's like it has that feeling of like this place has stood the test of time, and now here are the people that, but they don't feel, I don't know, they don't feel like modern in a way. They kind of feel like they're sort
Timeless.
of a little bit, yeah. Like if you had told somebody that that was a show that took place in the 1970s or the early 70s, like they'd be like, sure.
Yeah.
Or then not early 90s, right? It's
Anywhere between the 70s and the 90s, I'd believe that show is happening.
Which, I mean, yeah, it's sort of a cheat because that's sort of when the show takes place. But it does sort of have that feeling where like the stylists don't feel like out of place. And they're sort of like, everybody's kind of talking about the good old days, especially with like Sam being thrown back and like going back to George Wendt, who I think is a wonderful actor. It's almost kind of sad when you see a guy in a character like this because you know it's almost impossible for him to escape that character for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I hear, he's a Second City guy, which is cool, from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I hear he did a lot of plays and theater, so he's like a legit actor, and he's great as Norm, but he doesn't really have much to do, but he does it extremely well. It's one of those things, it's specific what he does, even though it's not a lot.
Yeah. Well, he understands almost like what it's like to be I don't know. It's like he goes into a bar in Chicago and there's like one famous bar across from Second City in Chicago where it's like all the players go or all the big players go after they're done with their rehearsals or their sets or anything like that. And they hang out and they got all their pictures on there. And it's like, and you can even see like George Wendt's on that wall. And you can just imagine him being in there and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to make it one day. You watch. Like,
for sure.
And it's just funny to see that's the types of things, the types of people that come out of scenes like that. Like, I don't know. That's the glamour of improv, that everyone chases that promise. And it's like, maybe you'll be lucky and get one sitcom or.
For sure.
Yeah. Or you end up, with a full career. Like, I don't know.
Or a podcast.
Which a lot of them do get. Some people get it all. Some people get all of it. That's a little, not that I'm jealous or anything, but
yeah, George Wendt's great. We should get him on the pod. Should we talk about the combo? Like, I feel we can do them together, Woody and Coach.
Yeah, because that's kind of the last two that we haven't talked about, the staples. Because, I mean, well, there's a couple more people, but let's dive into it because that's the bartending crew, and I mean, it's tough to say oh yeah, who do you like better? Because I think they're both bringing way different energies to the table, but they're also bringing like the same energy in a
Yeah,
way.
it's like you can feed them the same jokes, but they have slightly different energy.
Yes.
Like you can give them the exact same jokes and they play the same way, which is kind of like it feels almost like cheating, but I love it for some reason. Like I was like, you literally just kind of copy and pasted a character in, but he's different enough where I'm loving what you're doing.
Right. Which it's so funny because I think so. We're obviously talking about Coach and Woody, right?
And Ernie Pantuzzo,
Yes.
great name, who played Coach. He was like Ted Danson's character, Sam Malone's like pitching coach. Like he was kind of like not the head coach, but
yeah. I think I'm looking him up right now who the actor was because he's wonderful. I've always loved Coach.
Oh yeah, Ernie Pantuzzo is that's his Cheers name, right?
Right, that's the character name.
But I have a feeling his real name's not far off from that.
I mean, if you had told me his name was Ernie Pantuzzo, I'd have been like, yep, that's him. Absolutely. No, it was Nicholas Colasanto was the actor's name. And I mean, Coach was great. Yeah, so he's like his coach, and he obviously did it as a favor, came to work at the bar with him. And yeah, but it's like you get an older actor and it's like there's always a chance that they're going to pass away. And I think it's after season 3 that he passes.
Yep. Season 4 just starts and he's like pretty much not there. And I'm like, where the hell's Coach?
Yeah, it's sad. And it's like, but he is sort of like I hate to call him the lovable idiot, but that's kind of what
he's
he
sweet but stupid.
Yeah.
What is it? What does Kevin Smith always say about Jason Mewes? It's like $1 million heart nickel head.
Yeah.
Is kind of his vibe, and I love him because that's also like that's a type of character I love doing in improv, which is like just not understanding things and being like kind of likable but stupid in the moment. Like it's very fun, so I love seeing it. Some of the best one-liners come from him or Woody, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's always a great, I don't know, it's a great episode when you get them kind of centric, but I think their power really is being the supporting character too, where you can just tell they're really trying to like help out the person. You know, they only have a limit on what they can offer. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a blessing when you lose a great character like that and you replace him with somebody who goes on to have a pretty great career overall as an actor. Mm-hmm. You get Woody Harrelson in there.
Yeah, again, he's really good as Woody, but you're also like, it's just crazy that this is Woody Harrelson who, because I guess if it ended early 90s, you haven't really gotten to him taking like weirder gonzo roles.
Yeah.
But like I think of him as a weird gonzo actor. Like I think of like Natural Born Killers and some others like The People vs. Larry Flint, like these kind of crazy out there movies. And he's very down the middle of the plate comedy guy in this other ones. There's little touches. Like there's one episode where because he becomes an actor on the show and he dresses like Mark Twain and he's doing like kind of a Mark Twain thing in episode. I was like, this is kind of fun because it's Woody like acting, really putting it in there.
Yeah, and he sells a good Mark Twain just because he's got that southern drawl.
Right.
Even though he's from like Indiana, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, which southern Indiana you sound like that a little. It's because there's northern Indiana and there's southern Indiana. You got to understand. And there is a big difference.
Northern Ohio and southern Ohio. And that is absolutely a thing. It's kind of crazy, but he's pretty fantastic. I think when Woody comes in, I remember being bummed and I'm like, it's Woody Harrelson. I was like, I'm sure he'll do fine. And then you're like, he's one of the best.
Yeah, he's got the goods for sure. I miss Coach, but I'm not mad at Woody at all.
No, yeah. It's funny though. I think I never thought about that you could feed him the same jokes and yet they're going to deliver it with the same kind of like empty-headedness, but you know that it's coming from a good place.
Yeah, my favorite joke was Norm was getting a job at a new company and his wife had to go out and have dinner with the other wives and see if that was a fit. And he said like, oh, things didn't go well. I guess she couldn't pass the muster. And Woody goes, well, maybe she couldn't reach it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's funny.
It's so great. It's an awesome cast. I think it's like the first time I remember, and it's funny that we talked about Danny DeVito and didn't bring up Taxi, which is also a very like similar workplace.
Which I forgot to say why I got back into watching Cheers was eventually I started watching Taxi, and I was like, if you're watching Taxi, you can watch Cheers because Taxi is much sleepier than Cheers.
Absolutely. Which it does. It feels like because it kind of lives at night, right? That's like when they're like really at their high time. Well, I suppose Cheers is though too. It's always
it's a bye.
But it does start. It does sometimes the day starts for them at like 3 o'clock, and they're like, "Norm, don't you have work?" And he's just like, "Yeah."
It doesn't feel like they're going home at like 2 every day. It just doesn't feel that way. It feels like at like 10 o'clock they're like, "All right."
I mean, and maybe we should talk a little bit about some of the gags though too. I don't want to bypass Kirstie Alley. I know we talked about actors who had questionable politics, but she's also passed away now, so I kind of feel like we're.
She has?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think she had cancer. I want to say she did. Yeah, but I know she has passed on. Unfortunately, yeah, 2 years ago.
And of course, my beloved Frasier Crane. He's a guy you don't want to go on his Wikipedia too deeply.
Yeah.
It is funny that a guy with those beliefs sounds like this.
Yeah, right.
Have I told you about the deep state?
Like, I don't know if you understood, but we can actually get, the dogs are getting eaten.
See, people don't understand Trump. He's just Gregorious. I'm like, what the hell, man? I did hear, so there was a Cheers podcast that was hosted by Ted Danson and Woody Harrelson.
Oh, wow.
And they had people on. Kind of a bummer. They haven't had John Ratzenberger or Rhea Perlman on yet. And I'm like, I don't know why you wouldn't have knocked out the people on that Cheers. They had George Wendt and they had Frasier Crane on. And it was a really funny episode because they just talked about how much like Woody Harrelson and Frasier would party. And apparently Kelsey Grammer, he was like, yes, at the time, my drug was cocaine. And I was doing lots of cocaine and drinking. And I had a motorcycle. And I would show up to work and I wouldn't have my shoes on. I'd be wearing sandals and I'd be in my motorcycle. And I'd still be on cocaine from the night before. And Woody would be like, yeah, man, you showed up. You looked real rough. And you could really just put it together, man, right before we went on. Like, yes, thank you. And he calls him Woods.
Woods?
Do you remember that time we were in Texas Woods?
Oh, my God. Which is so funny because it's just, I don't feel like personality-wise in real life they'd even be a fit, but somehow it does almost like because of that makes sense that they would be friends.
Yeah. Like, I mean, yeah. I think back in the late 80s, I would have loved to have gone out with Woody Harrelson.
I don't think he would have survived the night with Woody Harrelson in the late 80s.
But Ted Danson the whole time, like, I don't believe this for a second. He's like, oh, I keep hearing these stories about you guys. And, I was always at home with my tea. I was in home. I was like, my guy.
Yeah.
Like, come on, Teddy.
You were hitting the sauce when you couldn't hit the sauce during the show. But it is interesting because you do look at that character and what maybe that's kind of meaningful for people who were struggling at the time to have somebody who is sober being represented on TV, working in a bar, right? Like, because I think there's a lot of stigma still around people who choose not to drink,
Right.
And a lot of it is not for like, oh, I'm above drinking. It's like, no, some people have a problem and they cannot do it, right? And it's like, but it's like, no, I think he made it look cool. Like, it's okay to be sober. You can be at the bar. You can be the most popular guy. Like,
For sure.
And I think that probably helped a lot of people that doesn't get talked about. And I mean, I think about a lot about what the show represented in that regard too. And you have, I think there was a lot of personal depth in some people. I talked about Kirstie Alley and like Rebecca's character. They really kind of get into, and you're going to see this too, and this is not too much of a spoiler, just how much how fragile that character is, like psychologically, and just like her own like personal just like self-doubts and just like her self-esteem is so low. And it's interesting to see a character like that, especially as someone who presents as a very strong woman who it's like back in the office she is just like a hot fucking mess. Right. She relies on her friends to pick her up. And I do appreciate that, like, in between some of the comedy that you get here, and there's a lot of great like running gags and fun like concept episodes, you do get some real character moments for a lot of these people.
Definitely. Yeah, I was actually wanting to bring that up because I think that's kind of a delineation in sitcoms is like, are we going to have any care for these characters in a dramatic way or an emotional way. Like you have your Seinfeld, which I don't have any sympathy or feelings of emotion with those characters, but I love those characters as like comedy.
Yeah.
And I think this has that about it. Like at times everyone's an asshole on this show, but they're still likable people for the most part. Cliff is pretty unlikable, but I still like him. Like he's kind of the worst.
Yeah.
But I think it strikes that balance of sentimentality and humor, which is, I wanted to ask you, is that something you like in a sitcom, or do you want to just like pure comedy? Or does it not matter?
No, I like when a show can offer me more than just its pure premise. Because I think if you don't have those moments of comic relief, then what are you doing here? You just are riffing jokes. And I think that's a lot of my problems with a lot of the 3-camera setup sitcoms, is that I do think you get a lot of like, oh, how many one-liners can we squeeze into this scene? And it's like,
you're 2.5 Men.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, right? Where it's like I don't give a shit about these characters, right? Like, or it's like, just I think that's why I've just never found a lot of that accessible. And I hate like I kind of don't like the laugh cues. That's always something that's bugged me a little bit. And I think I was just talking about this the other day, that coming across a show like Arrested Development was like a complete life changer for me, because all of a sudden it was like I got to decide when I wanted to laugh at a joke, and I'm like, I caught that. Did anyone else catch that joke? That's great. And like that's a bit that they set up like 4 episodes ago. Whereas like this, and I think this is why I almost think of it as cozy though now, is like they kind of guide you along. They're like, how about that one, right? Huh? You hear everybody laughing?
Yeah, it works for me if it feels theatrical.
Yes.
Like because then it feels like I'm watching a live performance, and that's the audience reaction, even though it's mixed in or whatever.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the line for me. But if I'm watching like a modern thing that's obviously like barely in front of an audience and it's got that laugh track, I'm not really into it. Like your Big Bangs and stuff like that.
I think and maybe that is the separation, because it was a product of its era too, right? Where I do think there was probably a lot more process to this, and you have a lot more. We just talked about it. George Wendt is a pretty legitimate stage actor on top of being a good improv comedian. Like he's somebody who probably really respected the process of doing that. Or you had fucking Kelsey Grammer showing up to set high on cocaine.
I was high on cocaine. Just getting off a motorcycle in shorts and sandals is just hilarious. Going into his wardrobe and putting on a 3-piece suit. Yeah. Just sweating.
And you'll kind of see the progression of Frasier though too, because you really do get a different Frasier here, especially with the fact that he's married. Oh wait, is he married yet?
He's getting married to BB Newirth.
Lilith, yeah.
I love me some BB Newirth.
She's pretty great. Undersold, and I think it's another character that I think the show, probably because she's a woman, doesn't quite give her time in the sun.
Which stinks, because when she shows up on Frasier, it's like hot episode coming in. This is going to be a good one.
Right, because it's sort of like he has to like face the past here. Like, what happened? But yeah, you definitely get a different dynamic because it is Lilith and Frasier just having to have their dynamics, and they're just snide remarks at one another sometimes, which is just so like pitch perfect.
For sure.
Yeah. It's the complete opposite of what you get with like a Sam and Diane or a Sam and Rebecca, where it's almost kind of like lovable contempt.
Right.
And you get a little more like dry, like, oh, we love each other because we say it, not because we feel it.
Yeah, it's like the clinical version of the couple who are always, excuse my language, fucking and fighting. Yeah. But it's like the like sophisticated, cynical version,
Yeah, for sure. Which it's great. I know. I was trying to look up how often BB Newirth was on the show. I think she's well credited enough that she's at least in like a season's full of episodes, but
probably like she's been in like every other third episode at this point, and she's pretty, but I feel like they're getting into like them getting married and stuff, so I feel that could die off and they're just kind of working an arc at the moment.
Which and that's We'll have to definitely talk off mic later when you get finally caught up, and we can talk about some of the story beats, because I'm trying to focus more on the core of Cheers, which I mean, there's not a lot. I mean, it's a classic sitcom, and then it's like the status quo is always returned, despite how upside down things get. Even when Norm gets a new job or like whatever, like. But I think that was kind of impressive. There was like a season where Norm is unemployed and he's just at the bar all the time. Like
he's painting.
Yeah. And they're just like, are you ever going to leave? Like, that's great. I don't know. I'm like, do we need to talk about more? Or is it time to get into Show Me the Franchise?
I think it's time for Show Me the Franchise, Tom.
Okay. We're going to Show Me the Franchise. So what are some things that you, for those who remember, is our coulda, woulda, shoulda segment. But yeah, what are some things you wish that maybe they could have done differently, should have done differently?
Here's something they could do differently is, you know where the new season of Frasier takes place?
Boston?
Boston. He moves back to Boston. So I don't know, in a very season 7 of Curb way, I think they need to rebuild the set and give us like a 1 episode of the Frasier revival that's technically a Cheers revival.
Oh, that would be kind of fun.
You know?
So, or like in the Picard way, where it's like it's Picard, but season 3 is all the OG TNG cast.
Right, exactly. I don't know that, but that's exactly.
Oh, well.
I can see what you're saying, for sure.
Spoiler alert. That's what happens.
To make you feel better, that even though I'm still not completely sold on it, that makes me more intrigued to watch Picard. So, and hey, I have Paramount Plus right now to watch all this Cheers, because they don't have it all on Disney Plus Hulu. They only have the first 4 seasons. They were like, after Coach died, we ain't paying for it.
But it's so good.
Yeah, I'm happy I'm sticking with it. It's worth the the Paramount Plus.
I was gonna say, don't mix up the two, Fred. This is definitely something that you need to have done.
So that's my big one. I just say it because it makes sense and it feel like it could be done.
Yeah.
And as far as spinoffs now, then I would have loved it. But it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to see necessarily what they're doing in long form today.
Yeah. I kind of get where you're coming from there, because you're like trying to figure out, I don't know. Yeah, what's become of Norm? We're still never going to see his wife?
Or it's like a cartoon show, Cliff and Norm.
Honestly, I would kind of love that.
Right? Kind of like an Adult Swimmy sort of vibe, but it's Cliff and Norm, like real Ren and Stimpy looking cartoons.
I would love it. Or you could get like, I don't know.
I'm picturing, I would want the Dexter's Lab guy, Tartakovsky, to do the show with those two guys, the animated show.
Ooh.
I just feel I would love to see a Ted Danson drawn like the dad from the Powerpuff Girls.
Where he's just like in the white lab coat.
Yeah, well, doesn't that already look like Ted Danson? You just draw the hair on, give him eyebrows.
I can kind of see it, actually. I could kind of see it. I don't know, though. Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like, I don't know, man. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking it over. And I'm just like, actually, I could see Cheers the animated series being very fun.
Kind of like the Clerks animated series.
Yeah.
And then you could just do it in the timeline that it happened.
Yeah.
You don't have, because everyone can do their characters and they can just be the same.
Like the new Scott Pilgrim, which was all animated,
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Okay. You might have sold me on that one.
The Cliff and Norm show, I do picture kind of like an Itchy and Scratchy thing where they're running at the camera and their arms are doing like the side-by-side thing together, like an old cartoon.
I would
And then they splash against the screen and drop down. And then like blood in James Bond, how it goes down the screen, it's beer. Or Goosebumps.
It's just dripping like foam. I would almost, oh man. There is a piece of me, though, that would love another just like single character spinoff. It's too late for it now. I think. But I would have loved to have seen them try that with at least one other character. But I don't know who the right one would have been because I don't think Cliff and Norm are the right answer. I don't know that Carla would have worked either. Or that's the problem. I don't know. Like I think that probably was their big question, right? Like who is be worthy of a spinoff?
I don't know. I think you don't do it on the Tortellis. You do something more like Woody's like, my mom was sick and I can't go because I got to take care of the bar. And like Rhea Perlman has to go to Indiana and like live with Woody Harrelson's family.
But isn't that the whole plot of Frasier where he's taking care of his dad?
Yeah. So like,
it's just everyone taking care of their sick family.
Hey, there's much bigger, IP projects that just redo the same shit.
That's true. That's true.
Like,
I mean,
if Rise of Skywalker can exist, my little thing can exist.
I would watch a Woody spinoff. I think they could have found something with that.
I think they should do it now.
Yeah. Didn't he? Oh, I can't spoil the end. Because they're
Endorse Robert F. Kennedy.
Oh,
is that what you're gonna ask?
Well, it's not actually far off from what ends up happening, but people who've watched Cheers will kind of know that's a little more on the nose than you want to imagine. But I would also, what's kind of funny? I would almost watch like a Lilith spinoff too if they would have found something with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I was gonna say about Diane too.
Diane spinoff would have been good, but like
single camera sitcom.
Because doesn't she go to Hollywood or no? What is she? She tries to run off with Sumner.
She's gonna be an author. I think.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, maybe I'm confusing her and Shelley Long for real. Which, hey, that's what she wanted to do, and that's what's good. I don't know. I think the only other things that I would say that I wish Cheers would have done differently, I think. It's kind of weird to say this about a show that is like so long running. That's what it's known for. Probably could have cut a season or two. Like you'll kind of get that feeling, I think, around season 8 and 9. You're gonna be like, okay, are we getting through this yet? Like,
okay, yeah, because it doesn't do the Seinfeld thing where at the end it's like, this is getting unwieldy, but it's also ridiculous. Like, yeah. I love that about like people like talk crap about season 8 of Seinfeld, and I'm like, where like George lies and he gets like a wheelchair, like a motorized wheelchair, stuff like that. Like they jump the shark, and I'm like, yeah, but at least it's something new. But I could see Cheers kind of getting into the same rut a little bit for sure after 11 seasons.
It
in the same bar.
You start feeling it a little bit. I think even with some of the newer characters that they bring in, after a while, you're kind of like, is this coming to the end? But then it starts to find its groove again as they get towards the end. You can tell they're starting to empty the hat of all the ideas that they had kicking around for a while. Plus, you have a lot of running gags like Bar Wars, where they're fighting with like Gary's Old Town Tavern, and like they have the competitions. Like that's the type of shit you keep living for. You're like, when's the next one?
Or do you do a crossover, a Bar War? East Coast Bar, Patty's Pub.
Oh my God.
Just have It's Always Sunny gang show up at Cheers.
That would be pretty fun.
Get Rhea Perlman and Danny DeVito together again.
I took a TV class in college that I ended up comparing both Cheers and It's Always Sunny. I think I got a B on it. I was a little upset about that.
I think if you had the context of It's Always Sunny now, you have a much stronger case than you did probably when you wrote it. Because I would say back in the day, It's Always Sunny used to skew more Seinfeld, and now they've coming around to like give depth to their characters because they've had to for running so long.
Oh yeah, no,
there's emotional arcs now.
They found a whole new like runway that they're just speeding down, and it's great. I think It's Always Sunny now is one of the great sitcoms.
But I still think that's a good comparison, even so.
Yeah, it's good.
It's only gotten better is what I was getting at.
Yes, I would agree with that. It's definitely, I don't know, Cheers has some juice. There's things that, I don't know, I would have loved to have seen more with Diane as like a steady character for a while, I think. But I do appreciate Kirstie Alley. I think despite Kirstie Alley herself in real life, I think the character of Rebecca is really good. And I think Kirstie Alley is really good at playing her. I think it keeps the show going in a way that you wouldn't expect. Because it brings a whole new dynamic, and then it brings in a lot of other people that you wouldn't expect to. Some really great, like, big cameos.
Oh, we're getting some good guest stars now. Like, John Cleese showed up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other ones. Like I said, the mom from Tony Soprano's mom was a nice surprise.
Have you gotten the British guy yet? The British, like, He's kind of like a waspy British dude.
Wasn't it not John Cleese?
Not John Cleese. I am thinking
a different waspy British guy.
Oh God, you know who he is? He is the sheriff of Rottingham in Men in Tights.
I've never seen Men in Tights.
Oh no! So this is the totally dead. Anyway, character's name or the actor's name is Roger Rees.
I'll get there.
You'll know him when you see him. He's pretty great.
I think I got to that now that I'm thinking about it. But back to this It's Always Sunny crossover. I'm picturing Dane DeVito. Frank walks into the bar, sits at the bar. Rhea Perlman's working there. And he goes, "Got any hard-boiled eggs?" And she looks at him and goes, "Yeah, I'm looking at one right now." Come on.
It writes itself.
Yeah, it writes itself.
Just the animosity of that he was like, God, I'm almost surprised that Rhea Perlman has not found her way into It's Always Sunny, despite...
I thought she was on it.
Wait, did she get on there?
I thought so.
Am I forgetting?
I think she got on there.
Ooh, I'll have to look it up.
I know that Breaking Bad Sopranos again, Tony Soprano's sister, Ada Turturro, got on It's Always Sunny. Ada Turturro.
Makes a lot of sense when you see just her energy on Sopranos, and then that fits well in with
Hell
those
yeah.
guys. But I always love we're not here to talk about It's Always Sunny. That's another episode.
Oh, y'all.
We got a lot of sitcoms to talk about, a lot of TV shows to talk about in time. But for now, we're going to hopefully put a pin here on Cheers. I don't know, but is there anything else that we want to discuss with Cheers before we get to the end here?
No, I think we cemented a lot in. I'm definitely thinking in the future, there's got to be a Frasier watch. Maybe after you've dipped your toe in. I don't know have you ever gone through and watched like the Frasiers?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Then
So,
you know.
When I watched all of Cheers for the first time, I went right into Frasier, which I will not recommend to anybody
No.
ever do. That is 22 seasons of TV, and that is a lot of fucking TV. But if you break it up and you do Frasier on its own after a little bit of time away from Cheers, I think you're going to love that Frasier run.
Yeah, and I don't sit and watch Cheers. Cheers is like my right before bed, or I'm like doing stuff and I have it on and I'm like watching, I'm catching it, but it's never like all right, settle up, gonna get in my chair and gonna watch some Cheers. You know, it's kind of the what to watch in between what's watching. You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. It's like, it's your nighttime show. That's what I always like to think
I
of.
love a
those shows.
nighttime sitcom. I think I might move on to the Bob Newhart show after. Never watched that. People keep bringing that up when I bring up Cheers.
That'd be a good one, I bet. Because I used to watch Newhart on Nick at Night, which is weird. I never watched Cheers or Frasier or anything like that and I think they were on Nick at Night too. But Newhart or the Bob Newhart show, great stuff.
Nice. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think you're gonna really like it. Fred, let's talk about our power rankings for Cheers. And in this case, it is going to be the top 3 characters. I'll say this with the preface of the fact that we did just focus very heavily on characters throughout this. I think that's what Cheers is. You could talk about episodes, the one where this happens or something like that. Like, the bar gets sold or the bar, gets into a dispute with another bar. But ultimately, it comes down to the people. Like, that's what Cheers is all about. That's what makes this thing sing. See, because we sang earlier.
I love it.
So, do you want to start with who your top 3 characters are?
All right. I'm gonna say my number 3, probably Cliff Clavin.
Ooh.
I love the bar know-it-all. I love his bits where he thinks different fruits and vegetables have the faces of different famous people. I think it's also I come with a lot of love for John Ratzenberger preloaded.
Yeah.
So there's some bias there. And I think that's why he's my number 3. Like, I almost want to rank him higher, but I'm like, I think it's just because I love him from Pixar movies. I mean, I wrote down earlier, I was like, I feel like when they're in the writing rooms for Pixar, they're like, what we need here is a real John Ratzenberger type. And then you're watching the movie, of course, like Monsters, Inc., the Yeti monster. Oh, you guys want some snow cones? And I'm just like, I love it. So number 3 for me. Number 2, I'm going to give it to Rhea Perlman. I was going to maybe get to Sam Malone, but like Man, I just love her energy. She's such a great physical comedian, which is something that not a lot of people, I don't think they're bad physical comedians, but they don't really have a chance to utilize that. One of the best physical bits I saw was last night was Kirstie Alley was talking to her boss and she was very flustered. And she was saying like, oh, I love this. I'm going to help you. I want to go to this party. And she's like, and she's like, keep saying I. Rhea Perlman's walking by. She pushes a chair into her and bumps her in a move almost like Fonzie hitting the record player to stop it from skipping. And the I and without like missing a beat, Kirstie Alley's great because she like just finishes her sentence and it plays and sounds just like a record skipping.
That's amazing.
And I was just like, that is just tops right there. And then my number one is Coach, and that might change as I watch it, but I just love, he's just a good-hearted old guy with some of the best jokes in the first part of the show.
His jokes are pretty unbelievable.
And I just love how much he loves everyone in the show and cares so much about everyone.
He is he's a very selfless person, and
that's what he has over Woody, which Woody does care and love all these people, but you don't feel it in the like monumental way that Coach loves and cares for all these
he's
people.
got like a paternal like almost feel to him,
and it's almost like he needs them more than Woody needs them, even though Woody's like, I'm out of town, like that's how he needs them. He's a lost guy out of town. This is who Coach has,
right?
And Ernie, I'm gonna just call him Ernie Pantuzzo.
Ernie Pantuzzo
Should have been his real name. That's my only critique. And yeah, great. My number one. We should have him on.
It's a great list there. I'm gonna start with an honorable mention because there is somebody I wanted to mention that's not going to make any top lists. That's Harry the Hat. We talked about him.
A real Tom character.
I love me some Harry because I am a sucker for magic tricks and for like sleight of hand.
You like a griff?
I love a little grift. Well, The Sting is a great movie. But I think there's some really great jokes, and I'll never forget the one joke with him where he like puts his hat on top of a shot and he goes, I'm going to drink this shot without touching my hat. And he just knows that Cliff is like the biggest mark he'll come across. And he's like, yeah, sure. And he kind of like mimics like drinking out of the shot from underneath the bar. And Cliff's like, there's no way. And he goes, double check it. And he Cliff lifts the hat and then he takes the shot and drinks it. And it's just like that type of humor like gets me because it's just like, it's so clever that I don't know. I just love it.
He just showed up again now that Woody's working there. And that was like the first time I got excited. I always liked his character, but like, that's when I was like, oh man, Woody's here. He's not going to know his business.
Yeah.
And he does the trick where he's getting like change. And he's counting like 1, 2, 3. 10 years ago, you said that 11, 12, 13, 23. You said you're about 23 years old. He's like skipping the numbers as he's counting. And then like he's leaving and Sam comes from the upstairs and he's like, what? He runs after him. He already knows that Woody has messed this up.
That's great. Have you seen the episode where I'm guessing you haven't gotten to that yet, where they have the poker game with Harry the Hat?
Yes.
Yeah, and he's like, because there's the other grifter.
The other grifter, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. He's like, these are my marks. Like, it's such because you're always kind of wondering how long. It's like, oh, is he working with that guy or not? Like, and it's like, no, he's always got the last laugh. But getting into the main characters, though, I mean, number 3 for me, it's Dr. Frasier Crane. The doctor is
yeah.
I think it's too hard to not pick Frasier just because he is, I don't know. Once he really starts to come into his own, he just is like laugh out loud good.
That's the thing. Like, I feel like he would move up later because I still got like 4 seasons and he's just starting, like he's just with Lilith now and we're starting and he's less moody. Yeah. 'Cause that's the thing. Like, that was kind of like his vibe in the beginning was like there was some of the Frasier we love, but also there was kind of this like, I'm mad that Diane left me at the altar and I'm just stewing over here,
right?
Which is a little funny, just not like full out funny.
Well, it's funny when he and Sam like become like buddies over just kind of ripping on Diane,
for sure.
Yeah, and like they're just having fun at her expense. But then yeah, I don't know. I mean, Frasier's, there's a reason they built a whole spinoff around him, right? It's like he's a great character. And I mean, you'll get that full impact by the end of the series. Number 2, then, I mean, yeah, it's gotta be Sam. Gotta be Sam Malone. He's just so nice. He's so suave. He always knows the right thing to say.
Kind of one of the best, center characters of a show, where you just kind of need the guy who holds the glue together.
Yeah.
Very good. It's always good to have a cool guy like that, like a Joel McHale.
Yeah, you do need somebody like that. I mean, if I were really cheating, I would almost put him like, oh God, I mean, almost on par with like Diane. I think Shelley Long's a fantastic character. So I'll put Diane. I mean, I'll put a tie for first between Sam and Diane. I think they make the show go, and I think she's just such a wonderful character, because you do need that. You need that like audience, like, you know, surrogate who can kind of get you into the world. Like, how do these people work? What are they like? Who, like, she's trying to observe. She's trying to impress them. She's trying to show how much better she is than them, and she's not. Like, and I think she plays all those emotions and all those feelings so well.
And it just inspired like one of the greatest, American songs ever.
Oh, little ditty
About Sam and Diane. Sucking on chili dogs.
Poor Jack. Sammy's gonna be a football star?
Baseball star.
Diane's debutante sitting back of Jackie's car. It's a great song.
The best meme I saw recently was the line like, everyone else while they're sucking on chili dogs, it was Michael Imperioli. Jesus, is that fucking necessary? I know Comedy Bang Bang talks about that a lot, but I will also still just never get over sucking on chili dogs.
I mean, like, just eat the dog. It's a great point. It's a very great point. Yeah, there's too many characters to pick from. I think we glossed over a lot of other side characters too, but I don't know there's too many that are more stronger than the ones that got selected either. But yeah, I think that gets us to the end of this episode, Fred. We're back. Cheers is in the can. We cheers to it. And we cheers to all of you for listening. Fred, anything you want to plug before we go?
No, just keep listening to the podcast. I'm hoping I'm going to be around Milwaukee for the holidays. I'm going to try to maybe elbow myself into one of the holiday shows at the Interchange. We'll see. I haven't done that yet. They haven't announced them yet, but I'm hoping to do a little bit of that. But just keep checking out the podcast. We're slowly up and running. We're going to have episodes. I'm sure Tom will fill us in a little bit more and go from there.
I don't have a lot to say other than thank you all for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please make sure to rate and review this show. Please give us 5 stars. Leave us a short review. It doesn't take very long to swipe up. Leave a 5-star review. If you're looking for us on social media, we are on Facebook, Instagram, still kind of Twitter. We have a new Blue Sky account. New changes, Fred.
Yeah.
Blue Sky's the place to bleed, guys. Blue Sky's the place to bleed.
Blue Sky's the place to bleed.
Blue Sky's smiling at me. Yeah, find us on there. We're still on Threads. So yeah, wherever you guys are on social, you can find us there. And of course, yeah, sign up for our Patreon. We'll be starting, I think, to do some things more regularly at the beginning of the year. So, yeah, look for that. But do not sign up through Apple Podcasts. I have to make that note. And if anybody is a sign up for the Patreon right now, please switch your account to go directly through the Patreon website. Otherwise, you'll be incurring an Apple fee. I will put something on the Patreon site itself. It'll probably be out by the time you hear this. But that is a note. I got that update from Apple or from Patreon themselves to say, don't subscribe through Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, don't go through the podcast app.
I think it's the Patreon app, the Apple Store app. That's
correct.
Where you don't want to subscribe through there. So please sign up through the Patreon website so you don't incur extra fees. And stay tuned for next time where we'll be talking about Coca-Cola. We'll see y'all then.
Goodbye.
Is charge my phone, drive, listening to you. And what they told you about will always be up to you.
If you hear the blues are calling, toss salad and scrambled eggs. Oh my.
Oh, I didn't know you were putting it to me.
Yeah.
Oh, baby, I got you pegged.
But I don't know what to do with those tossed salad and scrambled eggs.
They call it again.
Scrambled eggs all over my face. What is a boy to do?
Good night, Milwaukee.